The enemy pilot's voice crackled through the radio. "One Apache helicopter against 6 fighter jets? This will be over in 30 seconds. Then they heard her laugh, cold and confident, before the sky lit up with explosions. Meet Captain Alexandra. Reaper Riley, 29 years old, red hair pulled back in a regulation bun, green eyes that had logged over 3,000 combat flight hours in the most dangerous airspace on Earth. For 4 years, she had piloted AH-64 Apache helicopters for the 101st Airborne Division. But to most people outside her unit, she was just another helicopter pilot. What they didn't understand was that Alex Riley wasn't just any pilot. She was an aerial predator who had redefined what attack helicopters could accomplish in modern warfare. Alex's father, Colonel James Ghost Riley, had been one of the Army's most innovative helicopter pilots before his death in Iraq 7 years ago. But unlike other military children who followed conventional paths, Alex had grown up studying air-to-air combat theory that most helicopter pilots never learned. Her father had taught her that helicopters weren't just ground support platforms. In the right hands, they could be deadly air superiority fighters. "Baby girl," he would tell her during their weekend training sessions at private airfields, "everyone thinks helicopters are sitting ducks against fixed-wing aircraft. That's their weakness. They expect us to run or hide. But a helicopter that fights back, that's something they never see coming." Colonel Riley had been more than just an innovative pilot. He was a tactical theorist who had spent years studying the limitations of conventional air combat doctrine. He believed that helicopters, with their unique flight characteristics and weapon systems, could exploit weaknesses in fighter aircraft that no one had seriously considered. His theories were dismissed by most of the aviation community as impractical, but he continued developing them in secret. Every weekend of Alex's teenage years had been spent learning advanced aerial combat maneuvers that weren't taught in any official curriculum. While other kids were at the mall, Alex was practicing evasive flying, learning to use terrain masking for aerial ambushes, and studying the weaknesses of fighter aircraft that most helicopter pilots never considered. Her father had taught her to think in 3 dimensions, to understand how altitude, speed, and timing could be manipulated to create tactical advantages that conventional wisdom said were impossible. He showed her how to read enemy flight patterns, how to predict fighter pilot behavior, and most importantly, how to use a helicopter's unique capabilities as weapons rather than limitations. The key, he would explain as they analyzed combat footage from various conflicts, is that fighter pilots are trained to engage known threats using established tactics. When they encounter something completely unexpected, their training becomes a disadvantage. They try to apply familiar solutions to an unfamiliar problem. When she enlisted after graduating from West Point with honors in aerospace engineering, Alex's test scores and tactical knowledge were so exceptional that her instructors recommended her for immediate assignment to the Army's most elite helicopter units. But what set her apart wasn't just her flying skills. It was her understanding of air-to-air combat theory that traditional helicopter pilots dismissed as irrelevant. During flight school, Alex had supplemented her official training with extensive study of fighter aircraft capabilities, missile engagement envelopes, and air-to-air tactics. Her instructors were puzzled by her interest in subjects that seemed irrelevant to helicopter operations, but Alex knew she was preparing for scenarios that others couldn't imagine. She had also spent countless hours in flight simulators, practicing maneuvers that pushed Apache helicopters beyond their normal operating parameters. Her unofficial experiments with extreme altitude flying, high-speed evasive maneuvers, and unconventional weapon employment techniques had given her capabilities that no standardized training program could provide. Alex had deployed to Syria as part of Operation Resolute Shield, supporting ground forces against well-equipped enemy fighters who possessed advanced aircraft and sophisticated air defense systems. Most Apache pilots in the theater flew carefully planned missions with extensive fighter escort and air superiority coverage. Alex preferred to operate differently. She had volunteered for the most dangerous assignments, often flying solo missions in contested airspace where other helicopter pilots required extensive support. Her unique approach to threat assessment and tactical planning had made her the go-to pilot for operations that required someone willing to take calculated risks that others considered suicidal. She had earned her call sign Reaper during her first deployment when she single-handedly destroyed an enemy armored column that had ambushed a Marine patrol. But what made her legendary wasn't the ground targets she destroyed. It was the 2 enemy helicopters she shot down during the same mission, using air-to-air tactics that amazed even veteran fighter pilots. Riley doesn't just fly her Apache, one F-16 pilot had written in an after-action report. She hunts with it. I've never seen a helicopter pilot who thinks like a fighter jock, but she makes it work. Word of her unconventional tactics had spread throughout the theater, earning her both admiration and skepticism from pilots who couldn't understand how she accomplished things that violated everything they knew about helicopter limitations. Some considered her reckless. Others recognized her as a tactical innovator who was rewriting the rules of aerial warfare. The mission that would define her career started as routine close air support. Alex was providing overwatch for a special forces team conducting reconnaissance near the Syrian-Turkish border when their position was compromised by enemy forces. What should have been a simple extraction became a nightmare when intelligence reports revealed enemy fighter aircraft scrambling to intercept any rescue attempts. The special forces team, call sign Ranger 7, consisted of 6 elite soldiers who had been gathering intelligence on enemy weapon shipments. Their mission had been going perfectly until a local informant betrayed their position to hostile forces. Now they were pinned down in a rocky valley with limited cover, facing an enemy force that outnumbered them 10-1. "Reaper, this is Overlord," the mission commander's voice crackled through her headset. "We're showing multiple enemy aircraft inbound to your location. RTB immediately for your own safety." Alex looked down at her tactical display, which showed the Special Forces team pinned down by enemy fire with no escape route. 6 American soldiers were about to be overrun, and the nearest friendly fighter aircraft were 20 minutes away. In 20 minutes, those soldiers would be dead or captured. "Negative, Overlord. I have Americans in contact. I'm not abandoning them." "Reaper, you're an attack helicopter. You cannot engage enemy fighters. That's suicide." Alex checked her weapons loadout: 16 Hellfire missiles, 1,200 rounds of 30mm ammunition, and 4 Stinger air-to-air missiles that most Apache pilots carried but rarely used. More importantly, she had the tactical knowledge her father had drilled into her about exploiting the weaknesses of overconfident fighter pilots. "Overlord, let me worry about the fighters. Just keep those soldiers alive until I clear the airspace." The radio chatter from the ground team painted a desperate picture. Ranger 7 was running low on ammunition, had 2 wounded soldiers, and was facing an enemy force that was systematically closing in on their position. Without air support, they had maybe 15 minutes before being overrun. Through her targeting system, Alex could see the enemy aircraft approaching. 6 aircraft in 2 flights of 3, flying in standard air superiority formation at 15,000 feet. Based on their radar signatures and flight patterns, they appeared to be a mix of MiG-29s and Su-27s, modern fighters with sophisticated avionics and air-to-air capabilities that should have made them deadly to any helicopter. But Alex had studied these aircraft extensively, and she knew their weaknesses. Fighter pilots were trained to engage targets at long range using beyond visual range missiles. They expected helicopter threats to be on the ground or at low altitude, not actively maneuvering in 3-dimensional airspace. The enemy formation was flying with the confidence of pilots who had never faced serious air-to-air opposition. Their approach was textbook perfect for engaging ground targets or slow-moving helicopters, but it left them vulnerable to the tactics Alex had learned from her father. The first enemy transmission confirmed her tactical assessment. "Flight leader to all aircraft, we have 1 Apache helicopter operating alone in Sector 7. Easy target. Form up for gun runs." Alex smiled grimly as she positioned her Apache for the engagement that would either save her ground team or cost her everything. She climbed to 8,000 feet, unusual altitude for an attack helicopter, but perfect for what she had planned. Her father's lessons echoed in her memory. When you're outnumbered and outgunned, the only advantage you have is doing something the enemy doesn't expect. Make them fight your battle, not theirs. This is Flight Leader, the enemy commander continued over open radio. 1 Apache helicopter against 6 fighter jets? This will be over in 30 seconds. That's when Alex keyed her radio and broadcast on the same frequency the enemy was using. Her voice was calm, almost conversational, but carried an edge that made veteran pilots pay attention. "Gentlemen," she said, her laughter echoing through the radio static, "you just made a very big mistake. The psychological warfare had begun." Alex knew that confidence was as important as weapons in aerial combat. The enemy pilots expected to face a terrified helicopter pilot trying to escape. Instead, they heard someone who sounded like she was looking forward to the fight. The first MiG-29 came in fast and straight, exactly as Alex had anticipated. Fighter pilots were trained to engage helicopters with high-speed passes, using their superior speed to avoid return fire. But Alex wasn't where they expected her to be. Instead of hovering at low altitude like a conventional helicopter, she had positioned herself behind a ridgeline that masked her heat signature. When the MiG committed to its attack run, Alex popped up from behind the terrain feature and launched 2 Hellfire missiles at a range that the enemy pilot never anticipated. The MiG-29 disintegrated in a ball of fire and debris before its pilot could even process what had happened. "Flight Leader is down!" screamed another enemy pilot. "How did a helicopter—" Alex was already moving, using the terrain to break visual contact while repositioning for her next engagement. The key to her tactics was psychological as much as technical. She was fighting enemy pilots who had never faced a helicopter that acted like a fighter aircraft. The enemy formation, suddenly deprived of their leader, began to lose cohesion. They had expected a quick, easy victory against a helpless helicopter. Instead, they found themselves facing an opponent who was hunting them with deadly precision. The second engagement came when 2 Su-27s tried to coordinate a pincer attack, approaching from opposite directions to bracket her position. Standard fighter tactics, but Alex had studied these maneuvers extensively. She knew exactly where they would be most vulnerable. As the first Su-27 entered its attack run, Alex dropped her Apache into a diving turn that brought her directly beneath the aircraft's flight path. The fighter pilot, focused on his attack profile, never saw the Stinger missile that Alex launched straight up into his aircraft's exhaust. The second Su-27 pilot, watching his wingman explode, pulled into a desperate evasive maneuver that put him exactly where Alex wanted him. She had already calculated his escape route and positioned herself for a shot that no helicopter pilot should have been able to make. Her second Stinger missile tracked perfectly, turning the Su-27 into burning wreckage that tumbled into the valley below. "This is impossible." The remaining enemy flight leader's voice carried panic and disbelief. "A helicopter cannot defeat fighter aircraft." Alex's laughter crackled through the radio again, colder this time. "Apparently nobody told me that." The psychological impact of losing half their force to a single helicopter had shattered the enemy formation's confidence. The remaining 3 aircraft were no longer executing coordinated attacks. They were flying defensively, trying to figure out how to engage a threat they didn't understand. That defensive mindset was exactly what Alex needed. Fighter aircraft were most dangerous when they controlled the engagement, using their speed and weapons range to dictate terms. But when they became reactive, trying to respond to an unexpected threat, they lost their primary advantages. The third kill came when one of the remaining MiG-29s attempted a high-speed pass from Alex's 6 o'clock position. The pilot was flying exactly by the manual, using superior speed to make a firing pass before the helicopter could respond. But Alex had been tracking his approach using her rear-facing sensors, and she had already planned her response. Instead of trying to outrun the fighter, impossible for a helicopter, she used the one advantage helicopters had that fighter aircraft didn't: the ability to change direction instantly. As the MiG committed to its attack run, Alex executed a maneuver her father had taught her, a tactical reversal that brought her Apache around 180 degrees in seconds, putting her nose to nose with the attacking fighter. The MiG pilot suddenly found himself in a head-on engagement with a helicopter that was shooting back. Alex's 30mm cannon spoke with devastating accuracy, sending armor-piercing rounds through the MiG's cockpit and engine bay. The fighter aircraft, designed for high-speed maneuvering, simply disintegrated under the sustained fire from the Apache's main gun. "3 down," Alex announced calmly over the radio. "Who's next?" The remaining 2 enemy pilots were now facing a tactical situation they had never trained for: how to defeat a helicopter pilot who was hunting them with the patience and precision of an apex predator. Their training told them to use speed and altitude to maintain advantage, but Alex had already demonstrated that conventional tactics weren't working. The 4th engagement showcased the full extent of Alex's tactical innovation. The remaining Su-27 attempted to engage her from long range, launching air-to-air missiles that should have been impossible for a helicopter to evade. But Alex had studied missile engagement envelopes extensively, and she knew exactly how to defeat them. Using terrain masking and chaff dispensers that most helicopter pilots never learn to use effectively, she not only evaded the incoming missiles, but used their smoke trails to track back to the launching aircraft. Her return shot, a Hellfire missile fired at maximum range, caught the Su-27 pilot completely off guard. Fighter pilots weren't trained to expect surface-to-air missile attacks from helicopters, and the Su-27 had no defense against the unexpected threat. The 4th aircraft joined its companions as burning wreckage scattered across the Syrian countryside. "Last chance," Alex broadcast to the final enemy pilot. "You can run, or you can join your friends. Your choice." The last MiG-29 pilot chose to run, turning away from the engagement and fleeing toward friendly airspace at maximum speed. Alex could have pursued, but her mission wasn't to rack up kills. It was to protect American soldiers on the ground. "Overlord, this is Reaper. Airspace is clear. Proceeding with close air support for ground team." The radio silence that followed her transmission lasted almost 30 seconds. Finally, the mission commander's voice came back, filled with disbelief and amazement. "Reaper, did you just shoot down 5 enemy fighter aircraft?" "Confirmed, Overlord. 5 kills, 1 probable that fled the area. Resuming support mission." What followed was a textbook close air support operation. With the air threat eliminated, Alex provided precise fire support that allowed the Special Forces team to break contact and move to their extraction point. The mission that had started as a potential disaster became a complete success. The ground team leader's voice crackled through the radio as they reached safety. "Reaper, this is Ranger 7 Actual. I don't know what you just did up there, but you saved 6 American lives today. That was the most incredible display of flying I've ever witnessed." When Alex returned to base 3 hours later, she found the entire flight line waiting for her. Word of the engagement had spread through every unit on the base, and pilots from every service branch wanted to see the helicopter pilot who had defeated fighter aircraft in air-to-air combat. Colonel Martinez, the base commander, was the first to greet her as she shut down her engines. His expression showed a mixture of amazement and confusion. "Riley, what you accomplished today, that should have been impossible. How does a helicopter pilot defeat multiple fighter aircraft?" Alex removed her helmet, revealing red hair damp with sweat and green eyes bright with the adrenaline of successful combat. "Sir, everyone assumes helicopters are defenseless against fighters. That assumption is what made them vulnerable." Captain Davis, an F-16 pilot who had flown over 200 combat missions, shook his head in disbelief. "I've been flying fighters for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like what you did today. Where did you learn air-to-air tactics like that?" Alex touched the small photo of her father that she carried in her flight suit pocket. "From someone who taught me that the most dangerous enemy is the one nobody expects." The after-action reports from that mission became classified studies examined by tacticians throughout the military. Alex had proven that helicopter pilots, properly trained and equipped, could engage fighter aircraft on equal terms. Her tactics were analyzed, studied, and eventually incorporated into advanced helicopter combat training. But the moment that defined everything came 2 weeks later, when Alex received orders for immediate reassignment to the Army's most classified helicopter program. She was being offered command of an experimental unit that would develop and test advanced helicopter air-to-air tactics. Riley, Colonel Martinez explained during their final meeting, what you proved that day changed how we think about helicopter capabilities in contested airspace. The Army wants you to train other pilots in the techniques you've developed. Alex looked at the assignment orders, seeing opportunities she had only dreamed about. Sir, I thought I was just a helicopter pilot. Colonel Martinez smiled. Captain, after what you accomplished, you're not just anything. You're a tactical innovator who's redefined aerial warfare. It's time we gave you the resources to teach others what you've learned. 6 months later, Captain Alexandra Reaper Riley was promoted to major and given command of the 1st Experimental Attack Aviation Battalion, the Army's premier unit for developing advanced helicopter combat tactics. Her engagement with enemy fighters became the foundation for new doctrine that revolutionized how military helicopters operated in contested airspace. Today, Major Riley trains the next generation of helicopter pilots in techniques that turn traditional air-to-air assumptions upside down. Her students learn not just how to fly helicopters, but how to think like fighter pilots while exploiting the unique advantages that rotary wing aircraft provide. Have you ever been told something was impossible, only to prove that the limitation was in other people's imagination rather than actual capability? Alex's story reminds us that the most dangerous opponents are often the ones who refuse to accept conventional wisdom about what they can and cannot do. The enemy pilots who faced her that day expected to encounter a helpless helicopter pilot who would flee or hide when confronted by superior aircraft. Instead, they found a warrior who had studied their tactics, understood their weaknesses, and turned their own confidence against them. If you believe that true innovation comes from challenging assumptions that everyone else accepts as fact, share this story. Because somewhere, someone is being told that their goals are impossible, not knowing that they're about to prove the experts wrong. Alex Riley didn't just survive that air battle. She redefined what helicopter pilots could accomplish when they refused to accept limitations that others placed on them. Sometimes our greatest victories come not from following the rules, but from rewriting them entirely. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this one.